Hello fellow fairy friends, it's Allie. In my last video I was talking about romantasy books, the subgenre, why I struggle with it, and why I don't like most of the books that I've tried. So today I thought it would be fun to discuss some romantasy and fantasy romance books that I do like, so I can prove to you that I'm not just a big ol' hater. Full disclosure, I think maybe only a couple of the books on this list I would consider romantasy. The majority of these are fantasy romance, which are fantasy books that are fantasy first, romance second, which I prefer. But do we really care about the distinction? I don't know. First up, Between Wrath and Mercy. This is an indie published romantasy book. Is it perfect? No, it is not. It is way too long. It does not need to be this long. It could have used some heavy editing. There are some lulls in the plot. There's some repetitiveness, but honestly, I liked the romance enough to where that didn't really detract that much from my enjoyment. I rated this, I think, 4 out of 5 stars, which is pretty high for these types of books for me personally. This follows a single mom in her 30s, and immediately that adds a couple of points for me, because when you pick up a romantasy book, most likely the main character is going to be like 18 to 22. As an almost 34-year-old woman, I'm just wanting to read about some fantasy main characters that are more my age. Sue me, okay? This is a second chance romance. The love interest and the main character, they had a thing when they were younger, and then some circumstances caused them to no longer be in a relationship. The main character ended up going on and getting married to a man who didn't really treat her very well, and she had a child. And then, well, you'll see. What I loved about this is the angst, the yearning, the groveling, the making up. The spice was very good. It is a very slow burn, which I appreciated. So yeah, if that sounds like something up your alley, be sure to check this out. I want to say it's on Kindle Unlimited. The Spell Shop. I would call this a cozy romantasy, but it's not so cozy where nothing happens. Like, this is a cozy story with personal stakes. There's still a conflict. It's not just slice of life boringness, you know? This follows Keela. She's a librarian in a magical big city. There's a revolution that's happening, and she's like, I gotta get out of Dodge. And she steals a bunch of magical books and goes and lays low on the island that she grew up on. She opens a spell shop and starts selling spells out of it, basically. The love interest builds bookshelves for her with his bare hands, and you know what? I love it. Keeper of Enchanted Rooms is so cute. This was one of my best finds on Amazon. This came up as a sponsored post or like recommended. I think I was purchasing another book, and you know how on Amazon it'll say more to consider or more items to consider at the bottom. This book was on it, and I just thought that the cover was so cute that I looked into it. I read it, and now it's one of my favorite fantasy romance books of all time. This follows a man who inherits this house. He goes to live in it and finds that it is haunted, slamming doors and things. So he has to hire this woman who is trained in fixing haunted magical houses. And so she comes, they stay together, they're trying to figure out what's going on with this house, they're trying to diagnose it and get it to behave, and then secrets start unraveling. It's kind of Victorian. It's almost like a gas lamp fantasy, I would say. It definitely has those types of vibes. Very cute. If you liked Half a Soul, you will also like this. Legends and Lattes. Are we seeing a theme here? I like cozy fantasy romance books. I just do. I don't know why. Legends and Lattes deserves all the hype that it gets. It is cute. It's cozy. The premise is unique and interesting. This one's definitely more slice of life, so if you need like heavy conflict to stay interested, you might not like this, but I didn't mind. This follows an orc who gives up a life of fighting to open a coffee shop, and there is a sapphic romance plot. Like it's like a hint, like a sprinkle. It's barely there, but it is there, and it is good. For all of my fairy friends, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies is very good. There is a ton of traditional fairy lore. That was probably one of my favorite parts about it. It follows Emily Wilde. She goes to stay in this rural village who is not that happy to have her there. It's her intention to study all of the fairies that live in the surrounding wilderness, and she gets herself into a little bit of trouble. What I like about this love interest is he is not your typical brooding shadow daddy. He's different. He's unique. He's one of those characters that you kind of have to grow to love, but once you get there, you're like fully on board. Divine Rivals, you're gonna have to hear me out and hear my explanation on this one. I really liked the first book. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I did not like the second book, so I'm just gonna pretend in my mind that this is a standalone forever and always, and I'm gonna recommend it that way henceforth. This follows Iris. She is a war correspondent, and she's in like this workplace rivalry with a little rich boy named Roman Kit. They both have magical typewriters that send letters to each other, and they're writing to each other, but they don't know the identity of each other, so they're like figuring that out. That's one of my favorite tropes. Okay, the romance was just so sweet and heartwarming, and what's the word I'm looking for? It was tender. Tender is the word. A very tender, innocent romance. Breath of fresh air. Really liked this one. Vampires of El Norte is a historical paranormal romance, but I'm gonna put it on this list. Okay, don't get mad at me. It's my channel. I make the rules. I can do what I want. The romance can be summed up in one sentence. But daddy, I love him. And I love that about it. I really do. The father is trying to keep his daughter away from the love interest because he's just a lowly worker, right? She deserves better. She needs to marry someone in her own class, but they are childhood sweethearts. They love each other. They need to be together. And it's so good. There's vampires, like a backdrop of vampires. Don't read this for the vampires, read this for the Western Gothic vibes and a dash of like paranormal, you know? 7 Year Slip. I guess this could be considered a contemporary romance, but there is a time traveling element, so that's fantasy to me. Okay, it's going on this list. Don't argue with me. This follows a woman who inherits an apartment from her dead aunt, and this apartment time travels. It lives 7 years in the past. So when she goes into this apartment and finds a sexy hot guy, they fall in love, but it's 7 years in the past, and that causes a lot of issues when you're trying to have a relationship. Very good, very interesting. It goes in directions that I was not expecting. This just really caught me by surprise, and it became one of my favorite romance books of all time. Well, that just about does it for today's video. Let me know some of your favorite romantasy books or fantasy romances in the comments. I'm always open to recommendations, especially because I struggle with finding books that I like in this category, so help a girl out.